Right now, if you add up all the energy consumed in a year on our planet, divide by the number of seconds in a year, you get what the average world's energy meter reads. You can all sing along. 15 trillion watts. A few light bulbs in Fresno, it doesn't matter. You're not solving the energy problem unless you're solving a problem on the scale of 15 trillion watts. This is going to double because of population growth and economic growth within 50 years. And even if we save as much energy as all the energy we consume today combined, you still have to make 15 trillion watts to get the arithmetic to work out. And don't be fooled, no amount of saving energy ever put food on somebody's table. No amount of saving energy ever turned on a light bulb or turned on a laptop. We're going to have to make tremendous amounts of clean energy. That's message one. This defines what's possible. Add up all the water flows in all the rivers, lakes, and streams on our planet. It's only 4 trillion watts if you took them all. Add up all the terrestrial practical wind on all land on Earth. It's only 2 trillion watts if you took it all. There are only a few things that are really possible according to the laws of the physics of our planet. That's message one. You could do it with nuclear power. It could scale. Here's the scale. You would have to build a nuclear power plant every single day from now until 2050 to get 14 trillion watts by the time you were done. So if you think that we are going to get simply a few nuclear power plants and solve our energy problems, or a few hundred, or a few thousand, think again, because this is the scale of the problem. So if you only built one a week, you leave 90% of the problem on the table. You could clean up coal if it doesn't leak. With a volume of liquid CO2 buried under our ground, the equivalent of Lake Superior every year. And we have to hope that 1% of it doesn't leak after 100 years, because if it does, the same amount is coming out at that point as what you tried to stop in the first place. So what else is possible? The third sing-along, the one I really want you to know. You can all repeat. More energy from the sun hits the Earth in 1 hour than all the energy consumed on our planet in an entire year. Nothing else comes even remotely close, not even a factor of 1,000 close. Actually, nuclear fusion is the answer to all of our energy problems. But you know, it's probably a pretty good idea to be not too close to a nuclear fusion reactor, and 93 million miles sounds just about right. Well, I've told you almost everything you need to know about energy. There really isn't much more to it than that. Make 15 or 20 trillion watts, either build a nuke a day to keep the doctor away, and or go to the sun. But, tribute to Johnny Cochran, he that cannot store shall not have power after 4. That's what matters. We've gone from what's possible to what matters. It doesn't matter if we put photovoltaic cells on everybody's roof, because it's still only a peak for somebody else's base load that no one knows what that is. It doesn't matter if you put windmills everywhere, because the wind only blows at night, and on the one day it doesn't blow. If you can't store, you can't have a big red switch that you get to flip that says United States of America on it. So we better find a way to store. Well, the energy density in the best battery is 200 watt-hours in a kilogram. The energy density in chemical fuel, like gasoline, is 13,000 watt-hours in a kilogram. You don't need to know anything more to know why it's hard to get range in an electric vehicle. Because other than the nucleus, the most energy-dense form of storage known to mankind is chemical bonds. Nothing else comes close. So I claim it is inevitable technology, like birds flying led to airplanes, like vacuum tubes led to silicon solid-state electronics, that we are going to find a way to take the biggest energy source known to mankind and store it in the most dense form known to mankind. We're going to find a way to make fuel directly from the sun. Because every study has shown that there are two big gaps. You can put all the PV and wind and all this stuff up, and if you can't find a way to store large quantities of energy, you don't have a system for that rainy day when the wind doesn't blow for 36 hours at least. If you don't have a way to get carbon neutral, high energy density fuel, not for those electric vehicles with yellow caps, but for the 40% of transportation globally that cannot be electrified, ships, heavy-duty vehicles, and last time I looked, there's no such thing as a plug-in hybrid airplane, then you don't have an energy system. You can't meet emissions targets, you can't live sustainably, you don't need to know anything more about what matters than find a way to make fuel from the sun. If you did it at 10% efficient, you wouldn't trade land for food for fuel. This would be 20 terawatts. Everybody, even northern latitudes, because of the hour to a year, has plenty of sunlight if they can store it to meet their energy demands forever. Well, this is why the National Academy of Engineering just recently said the grand challenge isn't just to make solar energy economical, but find a way to store it by making chemical fuels the way plants do, but better. This is why Secretary Chu established an energy innovation hub, one in our country, the highest priority for the Department of Energy's Basic Science Office of Science, called the Joint Center for Artificial Photosynthesis that I am the director of, which will have 200 people. It has $122 million over 5 years to try to do what nature did, but we're going to beat it at its own game. That's what President Obama called out in the State of the Union address when he said at Caltech, they're developing a way to turn sunlight and water into fuel for our cars. It is an inevitable technology. It's going to happen someday. Better be sooner rather than later because of ocean acidification, because of CO2 concentrations, because of sustainability, because there isn't any other real choice. We know this works. We know there are certain minerals, like strontium titanate, this one, when if you shine light on it, I may not be able to do this from this. Maybe I can. If you shine light on it in the sun, it bubbles hydrogen and oxygen out from water. We also have now catalysts that can make liquid fuel from carbon dioxide in the air directly from sunlight, air, and water. There are no wires. There are no bugs. That's our motto. No bugs, no plants, no wires, and beat nature at its own game. So why aren't these on the rooftops tomorrow? It looks like magic because out bubbles fuel that you can store and then use later on for your cars, transforming the gas into a liquid. You can use it next week. You can pump at the gas station. Well, there are 3 things you want. You want it to be robust, you want it to be cheap, and you want it to be efficient. And we can now give you any 2 you want at the same time, but not the 3rd. You want it to be robust and efficient, it isn't cheap. You want it robust and cheap, it isn't efficient. You want it efficient and cheap, it doesn't last. So the job of JCAP is to do better than 2 for 3, which gets you into the World Series, but not in this game. We've got to go for the trifecta. Nature gives us the blueprint. We don't want one material, because that material looked pretty white. It was actually a pigment that's related to the ones used in sunscreen. And even then, it still has an efficiency 5 times higher on a yearly basis than the fastest growing plant. We know we can beat nature. We've done it. We know that the airplane can get off the ground even though birds have feathers and teach us how to fly. But to do better than that, to really make this work, we think we should really copy the inspiration from nature and use two photosystems. Because you need a certain voltage to make chemical fuel. If you don't make 1.23 volts, you can't split water. That's the first law of thermodynamics, not repealable. All right? So if you get 1.22, you get nothing. By taking one material, you have to get so much energy in the light that you waste the energy in the reds and the greens. You have to absorb only the blues, and by then you've wasted a lot of the energy in the rainbow. But if you can take two of them and hook them up like batteries in series, just like in my laser pointer, I can get two, each of which only gives me half the voltage I need, and hook them together, and then you're off and running. That's what nature does with its two photosystems. It uses two chlorophylls that are green, so they absorb the red photons, as well as the other colors of the rainbow. Don't waste much of the solar spectrum. Actually, plants should be black, not green, if they were optimal energy conversion machines. But they waste 30 or 40% of their energy just keeping the system alive and reproducing and rebuilding itself. At universities, we call that overhead. So we know the blueprint. Have two photosystems. We know we need a membrane because you'd better separate your products. Nobody really wants to make hydrogen and oxygen in the same place at the same time for very long. And on top of that, it's good to keep those products separate because the catalysts that we need in order to make and break chemical bonds are going to be different for the reducing part of the reaction that makes the fuel and for the oxidizing part that makes the oxygen. Nature actually has those catalysts. And those catalysts don't use expensive metals like platinum and iridium, like fuel cells use. Hydrogenases use iron, not platinum. The oxygen evolving complex uses manganese. It's responsible for all the oxygen in the atmosphere that we breathe. Doesn't use iridium oxide. So why don't we go for the cheap metals instead of the expensive ones? That's what we're trying to do to get to the trifecta. Our system's not going to look like a plant. It's going to be unrolled. It's going to have the same blueprint of a membrane, two photosystems, except instead of unstable organic material that has to be rebuilt, we have microfibers of semiconductors that we use nanotechnology to make. They're like hairs in a hairbrush, and we peel them off in a piece of plastic. And we peel off double layers and then literally glue them together, just like laminating driver's licenses. And then we embed a catalyst on one side and a catalyst on the other and feed it water and sunlight. We can even feed it gaseous water or sprinkle water vapor over it from a sprinkler system. And then we vent the oxygen and we keep the gas. When we're done, it's going to look like that. It's going to look like a high-performance rain jacket with a sorbing layer for the water and then a porous layer to vent the oxygen back to the air. We don't want that. With the photoactive in-between layer, with the catalysts on one side to make the oxygen, on the other side to reduce either to gaseous fuel, hydrogen, or directly liquid fuel like methanol, and then we wick it out the sides. No algae, no living bugs to gunk up the works. Roll it out, stored energy. We know this actually almost already works. This is a picture from our lab of such microfibers that we grew from really cheap materials, and the reason we like the microfibers is because they're very long to absorb the light, just like aspen trees. Nature figured it out. But the carriers of the energy can move sideways a really short distance, so they don't have to be very pure and go all the way back up the top the way they went down the bottom. They can make a detour sideways and have to only go a short distance, so you can use really cheap defective material and still make it work just fine. The other reason we use these microfibers is because they can be rolled up and unrolled in a piece of plastic, in a membrane that can actually pass these protons to separate the products and keep the whole system neutral. We have this system working. These silicon rods actually are the bottom piece of that photo that we drew on an easel a few years ago that formed the basis for this entire project. And it came to life in 2 years after we drew it, and we proved that we could make hydrogen this way, except that we don't have the other material that makes the oxygen. So we have a piece left to make. That's why we're still in business and not declaring victory. And that piece, as well as the system, is what we're working on. Now, we actually don't know if we want rods, or if we want Christmas trees, or if we want pine cones. We don't really know the optimal shape, because we want to match light absorption with liquid flow in and out, with where to put the materials. We really probably want it like blades of grass, when you just want them oriented mostly toward the sun instead of exactly all pointing up, because if they're pointing all straight up, then at high noon the light goes right through it instead of scattering around like going bowling. So we do all of that. In fact, we build pieces. We build new light absorbers. We actually build catalysts. We build the systems. We build the pieces of plastic. We take it to the point where we know we will fail. We told the Department of Energy we're going to fail because our first prototype is not going to work. Our second prototype is not going to work. And our fifth prototype is not going to work. Because the only way to get the sixth one that does work is to build the first 5 and to learn from your mistakes. And to be bold enough to know that you are not going to get off the ground like the Wright brothers until you try enough times to improve the system to make sure it all works, to make sure it all works together at once. That's JCAP. At a third strength, there are 80 people right now. There'll be 200 as we ramp up. I tell Congress that we only have one choice. We need to bet on the only thing that we do well in our country, which is innovation. And if science and technology can't give us better choices, we're in big trouble. But if you want to bet, you should bet where you have the hand. And the hand we have is the smartest people that want to work on this problem until they're blue in the face to solve it. And if they're willing to bet, we will do our part and deliver. With that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I work over this side.
So you're seeking catalysts to move this process along, and you've shown some great results in various domains. You know, it occurs to me the periodic table is finite. It fits on a sheet of paper.
Right.
And so, you know, it's unlikely in my mind that very complicated molecules are likely to be the answer. It seems like you're going to want to restrict yourself to smaller things. What are, and therefore the combinatorics are squeezed, right? So in your mind, what are the chances that the combinatorics work in your favor?
One part of JCAP is to stack the deck to be in our favor because of exactly that arithmetic. Because we can screen our activity by measuring current, then we are setting up the world's largest combinatorial catalyst search. And we are going to make and screen more catalysts in one day combinatorially than have been screened in human history. Because we use an inkjet printer and we've modified the inks to deliver any one of the only 20 elements that we care about in any combination onto an LCD panel backplane that we then dunk into water and use the same row column addressing that's used to display a monitor to read the current off of every one of 4 million catalysts within a day. We take that data, we open source it, anybody can out there look at the composition and then reactivity and tell us what to do next the next day, all computer controlled. And we have a team of people trying to do that so that what took 5 years takes 5 milliseconds. So we revolutionize the way chemists make and characterize catalysts.